The broadcast of the regular meeting of the Budget Committee will now begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Lene Palmisano. I'm the chair of the Budget Committee, and I'm going to call to order this regular committee meeting for Thursday, December 4th. For Friday, December 4th. Before we proceed, I will note for the record that this meeting has remote participation by council members and city staff as authorized under the provisions of Minnesota Open Meeting Law, Section 13D.021, due to the declared state of local public health emergency. At this time, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll and verify the presence of a quorum.
Councilmember Reich.
Here.
Gordon.
Here.
Cunningham.
Present.
Ellison.
Present.
Osman.
Present.
Goodman.
Present.
Jenkins.
Here.
Cano.
Here.
Bender.
Here.
Schrader.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Fletcher.
Here.
Chair Palmisano.
Present.
There are 13 members present.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. Colleagues, we spoke at the end of the last markup about what appeared to be an opportunity where there's a lot of consensus on a lot of the public safety items in these different safety beyond policing kinds of programs. We then had meetings all night and all morning, and we haven't really had an opportunity to engage in this work. But I am convinced that we're interested in finding a path forward. So moving to vote on item number 14 today and all the different elements of it, I'm afraid would foreclose an important opportunity for that to happen. I've suggested that we give ourselves just a couple of additional days to talk. So my plan for today is that we will discuss items 1 to 13 in the packet of amendments that the clerk has assembled for us. I've heard from some of you that you'd like to be part of those discussions, and we will do so without violating open meeting laws. So without objection, let's reserve the actions on discussion item number 14 for an adjourned meeting. We'll adjourn this to Monday, December 7th at 1:30 and take care of it at that time, as there are no other public meetings during that time. Are there any objections to that? Seeing none, today we will continue the work we began yesterday on amendments to Mayor Frye's 2021 recommended budget. Before you today, you'll see a revised packet of amendments, and there was just a new version posted and sent out. This includes ones that we didn't get to yesterday that have been reordered, as well as some new additions. As with yesterday, I will ask our budget director, Micah Intermill, to introduce each proposed amendment. We will be displaying the amendments on the screen for the viewing public, and the entire amendment packet has been added to the LIMS Legislative Information Management System. I invite my colleagues and others to use the chat queue, please only for asking to speak, and I'll call on you as soon as practical, and I will recognize Mr. Intermill to introduce amendment number 1. Mr. Intermill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amendment number 1 is a motion by Councilmember Palmisano amending the 2021 Mayor's recommended budget in the general fund for the City Clerk and Community Planning and Economic Development Departments, transferring a total of 1 FTE and associated funding from the Zoning Land Use Division in CPED to City Clerk Legislative Support and Operations Division, effective January 1, 2021, increasing the Legislative Support and Operations Division by $97,000, reducing the appropriation from Zoning Land Use by $97,000. This amendment is an effort to centralize the clerk functions that pertains to policymaking boards and commissions. The specific FTE to be transferred includes the existing 1 FTE committee clerk performing support functions for the Heritage Preservation Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals. The city clerk will assume the full transfer of the above named position continuously, and associated funds shall be budgeted accordingly.
Thank you. I will put myself here in queue just to briefly speak with this amendment. This was an amendment that was really driven by city staff. I really appreciate the work of our city clerk and Mr. Poor from CPED and formerly Director Corbell from Civil Rights to come together and just to see how we best serve all of our different public-facing boards and commissions and the commissions that we use the skills and expertise of others in our community. I'm happy to invite Mr. Carl to make a couple of comments, and I invite any questions from council members.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you requested, I just wanted to explain that this proposal essentially, as Mr. Intermill said, centralizes and standardizes within the clerk's office meeting management support functions for the city's independent policymaking bodies. So this would include, as an example, calendar management, the production and posting of legal notices, agendas, minutes, and related reports, and other functions similar to what the city clerk's office provides for city council. And so in addition to the council and its standing committees, this would mean that the clerk's office would provide meeting management support for 12 bodies that operate within the enterprise in a policymaking capacity. And that includes the Audit Committee, the Board of Estimate and Taxation, the Charter Commission, the city's Canvassing Board, the Civil Rights Commission, the Ethical Practices Board, the Executive Committee, the Heritage Preservation Commission, the Local Board of Appeal and Equalization, the Planning Commission, the Police Conduct Oversight Commission, and finally the Zoning Board of Adjustment. And so this would centralize all of those policymaking bodies' support functions in the clerk's office so that we could provide a consistent and standard level of support, both for those bodies and the members of those bodies, but also for members of the public in terms of their engagement and interaction with the work of those bodies going forward.
Thank you. Seeing nobody in queue, I don't think there's anything further. So we have amendment number 1, authored by myself, and I will ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Chair Palmisano.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Amendment number 2 is a motion by Councilmember Osman. I'll first recognize Director Intermill to introduce that amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amendment number 2 is a motion by Councilmember Osman amending the 2021 Mayor's recommended budget in the general fund for the Health Department, clarifying that the pilot programming fund opioid peer recovery change item is to operate out of Fire Station number 7.
Thank you. Councilmember Osman, would you like to speak to your amendment? Go ahead.
Yes, I do. My colleagues, this is opioid epidemic has been hit heavily in East African and Native American community. Listening to the health department presentation, they noted that this is the critical area in the city, and the fires. There was 4 fire stations that was picked to pilot this program, and I'm suggesting that this fire station 7, which is located on right in the middle of Native American residents and East African residents on Franklin and Cedar area, should be the fire station that this pilot program should take place. What this program does is it offers a resource center. Any individuals who is dealing with opioid can go there and find a resource to get help. There will be a Narcan and just a resource hub for a lot of individuals in the area to walk to the fire station. The location is perfect, so I would ask my colleagues to support me on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Council President Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to Councilmember Osman for taking up this issue which is hitting our community really hard. I wondered if we could hear from the health department. I just want to understand exactly how this fits in. For my own information, I didn't have time when we got the amendments till now to follow up with staff for questions. So, how does this interact with the staff that we have that were intended to be working on the opioid response? So is this city staffed, or is it part of grant agreements that we have? Maybe the commissioner or health staff could help answer some of those questions.
Yes, I'm not sure who we have from the health department that might want to speak to this. I'm sure there's somebody here.
I'm present here.
Commissioner Musicant, go ahead.
Yes. So yes, I hadn't seen this amendment, but I believe it is just specifying something that was already in the mayor's budget, which was a pilot to be operated out of fire stations, to see if that's an approach that would be helpful to use that resource of fire stations for people who are seeking help with opioid addiction. And so, as Councilmember Osman mentioned, there were several fire stations that were mentioned as possible locations. And so what I'm seeing in this is just an opportunity to step in and say, yes, let's choose this one. So otherwise it's there's funding for the fire department, which is predominantly where it would occur, and then there'll be some training and some resources provided, but it's already in the mayor's budget.
And it would be staffed by fire?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's helpful. And I don't want to take time. Part of why I'm asking is because I do want to do some follow-up with my colleagues related to our homeless response from this summer. The health staff who are dedicated and designated for working on opioid-related issues were the staff that were out in the encampments this summer. And I just want to make sure that we're actually fully staffing all the things that we want to make sure we're doing. And obviously there's overlap between those two issues. But they also each deserve their own appropriate response. So I appreciate the follow-up, and I can follow up with my colleagues about the other issue as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to get some clarification. So this is saying then that it would not be operating out of fire stations 4 and 5, but just fire station 7. Is that correct? I'm not sure who would be the person to answer that question.
I think Councilmember Osman, did you want to respond to that?
Yes. As the health director put it in, that 4 stations were the possible pilot. One of them, I guess there was 4 choices, but they had to pick one at the end, and the fire station had to decide that option. So I am asking that pilot program should be placed on fire station 7.
Got it. Okay. And I'm assuming that decision's just is that decision being made on data? And that might be a little bit more of a commissioner.
Yes, well, for me, in my experience, and also listening to the health department, that this is the area that is the hot zone for opioid, usage, and having this area and right there on East African community and also Native American community, it will be the appropriate station to host this program.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I went back through and reread. My brain remembered 4, 5, and 7, but I see it says 4, 5, or 7. So I understand the clarification. And just also want to name that this is also hitting the Black community really hard too. That this would not necessarily disproportionately serve Black folks in that same way, but and that's not necessarily what I'm advocating for. I just really feel like it's worthwhile naming because it's been a really silent epidemic within the Black community here on the north side as well. But I know absolutely that the concentration of what we're seeing is happening around that particular area. So I support this. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Councilmember Gordon.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to this a little bit because that happens to be my neighborhood and I know this area pretty well over here, and maybe folks don't know where the fire station is exactly, but it's right near the Franklin Light Rail Station. In fact, it's about a block away from the Well of Forgotten Natives and where the Navigation Center was, and then it's very close to Cedar Riverside, where there and what we are hearing about that area, both Councilmember Osman and I, from people who are picking up the needles and dealing with all the concerns that even go all the way down the Hiawatha Rail Corridor as well, is that this is a really significant problem there. I would advocate expanding it, especially if it meets with any success quickly. It's tough to say we have to figure out one place to do it, but I think that's a really good place to start with, and then we can build support for that and branch out. And I just wanted to add a little bit more details about where it's located so folks could understand that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from council members? Not seeing any. We have amendment number 2 authored by Councilmember Osman before us, and I will ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Chair Palmisano.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Next, we have amendment number 3, also by Councilmember Osman. Director Innermill, would you read the amendment, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, amendment number 3 is a motion by Councilmember Osman, amending the 2021 Mayor's recommended budget in the general fund for the Community Planning and Economic Development Department on a one-time basis, directing employment and training staff to deploy $50,000 of the 2021 budget for audio-visual communication to support work at the Cedar Riverside Opportunity Center.
Thank you. Councilmember Osman, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Yes, I do. My community here in Ward 6 are the lowest economic and income index of the city of Minneapolis. A lot of people lost their jobs during the COVID outbreak. Majority of the residents have low-paying jobs, and the jobs they rely on, they have lost because of the COVID. Opportunity Center has been, Cedar Riverside Opportunity Center has been a center where that really worked for the residents in Ward 6. Councilmember Warsame did a lot of work bringing this Cedar Riverside Opportunity Center in the community, and it's so many great things, so many jobs and training and that has been happening in this location. Community relies on this location, but during the COVID and the social distancing, this location has not been getting foot traffic or the gap. So I want to make sure that we are supporting this community that had that COVID and the effect of COVID had a huge hit. We are supporting the Cedar Riverside Center opportunity to continue during these difficult times, and to put $50,000 on the budget for audio-visual communication, which is having a community specific Somali Oromo language to broadcast and put the word out that the center is open and it's operating, and really making sure the great things that's going on Cedar Riverside continues during these difficult times. My community is it's bilingual. English is not their second language. My community is not like any other community. I talk to every department, any approach or any model of City of Minneapolis comes up with, either the health department or violence prevention. It has to be specifically targeted to immigrant community and a creative way that we can support this community. So I thank you, and if you have any question, I'm willing to answer it.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from council members? Seeing none, we have amendment number 3, authored by Councilmember Osman, and I will ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Gordon. Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Goodman. Jenkins.
Aye, sorry.
Got it. Jenkins.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Chair Palmisano.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Next, we have item number 4, a motion by council members Jenkins and Kano. Director Intimo, will you read the motion for us?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, amendment number 4 is a motion by council members Jenkins and Kano, amending the 2021 mayor's recommended budget in the general fund on an ongoing basis by moving the cultural district's art fund change item from community planning and economic development to the city coordinator, increasing the expense budget in the arts, culture, and creative economy unit by $100,000 and decreasing the expense budget in community planning and economic development in the general fund by $100,000.
Thank you. Council members Jenkins or Kano, would either of you like to speak to this amendment? I'm not hearing from them. Are there any questions or comments from council members? Councilmember Kano.
Yes, happy to speak on this. Apologize. My new headset plugged in here. All right. So this connects to the work that we started probably a year to a year and a half ago, relating to the intent to solidify, strengthen, and grow the arts-related work that the city of Minneapolis is doing. And so through that work, we've steadily studied the different ways that the city's arts and creative economy work happens. You all might remember that a few days ago, I believe this week at POGO, we approved a resolution further affirming the direction of that work and sort of reminding us to kind of collect it and bring it back together and centralize it. So this particular budget amendment falls in line with that intent and that body of work. And so this is budget neutral. It doesn't increase any resources or decrease any specific resources. What it does is it sort of corrects the home department of this work so that we don't continue to dilute the work of the arts and creative economy, but that we begin to center it in its proper home. So this budget amendment speaks to specifically the money in CPED to go towards murals and cultural programming through the Great Streets program. And after several meetings with city staff, both in the Creative Economy Office as well as in CPED, we decided that it would make sense to bring this budget line item over to the Creative Economy Office instead of requiring that the CPED department sort of reinvent the wheel and come up with a new series of metrics and program guidelines and ways to administer the program. So that's pretty much what it is. It's a pretty straightforward move, and would welcome additions or further elaboration from my colleague, Council Vice President Jenkins, if she wishes. Otherwise, I'm happy to take questions or the vote.
Thank you. Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I don't have a lot more to add than Councilmember Cano's very succinct and accurate representation of this move, and but certainly would be willing to stand for questions if colleagues have any.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council members? We did talk about this just recently in committee. Seeing none, we have amendment number 4 authored by council members Jenkins and Cano before us, and I will ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Cano.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Chair Palmisano.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Next, we'll move on to Amendment 5 by Councilmember Cunningham. Mr. Intermill, will you read the motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, amendment number 5 is a motion by Councilmember Cunningham amending the 2021 Mayor's recommended budget in the general fund for the Community Planning and Economic Development and Regulatory Services Departments on a one-time basis, increasing the expense budget for housing inspections by $100,000 for a tenant relocation fees program, and reducing the expense budget in the Affordable Housing Development unit for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund change item by $100,000.
Thank you. Councilmember Cunningham, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Madam Chair. So, colleagues, this is to address an ordinance that we passed at the end of last year, the Tenant Relocation Fees Ordinance. I hope that you all are still familiar with that. As a part of that work, the way that it is operationalized is that the city fronts the money so that the tenant is able to access those dollars quickly as they are rapidly losing their housing at no fault of their own and due to negligent landlords. And then we assess it, and that's how we backfill it. So in order to actually operationalize this ordinance, we need to have a pool of money that is available to front it, and then essentially have a revolving fund that is replenished. The logic, or I'll also say that last year when this ordinance was coming through, that I had considered bringing forward an amendment then, but we were like, it's okay. We will move money, that unspent dollars in 2020, we will move that and create a fund. And of course, this year happened and we do not have unspent dollars. And so that unfortunately never came to pass. So we have been unable to actually fully operationalize this really critical renter protection ordinance that we put into place. Now, the logic behind this particular move is that areas like the 4th Ward, which now is around 50% renters, which is, we can get into the history of that at some other point, but so we have a large amount of single family homes rentals versus high density rentals. So at least half of North Minneapolis does not actually benefit really almost at all from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. However, this would actually greatly benefit, because what we do know is that this particular issue disproportionately impacts folks who are living in single family home rentals. So this is a way to be able to leverage those dollars as a way that actually still would positively impact folks who are not being impacted as much as we would like to see through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. This is one-time dollars. This is not ongoing. So that means that starting in 2022, that $100,000 will go back to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So this is one time. And there is still the proposed move is, increase is $7.3 million. So this $100,000 would result in about 2 to 4 less affordable units. For 2021, however, the potential for thousands of low-income renters in particular to be positively impacted by this $100,000 in both the short and the long term is a benefit for our city. So I would ask for you all just please support this. And this money would be an existing pot, meaning what is not spent at the end of 2021 will not be reverted back to the general fund. It will remain, so we won't have to keep doing this. So that is this amendment, and I hope that you all will please support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Council President Bender, and then I'll put myself in queue.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I wasn't part of developing this, but obviously I've worked on tenant issues as one of my kind of policy areas, and I really support this move. I think, obviously our Affordable Housing Trust Fund is a really important part of our city's investments around housing stability, but it's, and it is a very expensive way, per unit often to help people be and stay housed. And these upstream investments in keeping people in their existing homes is such an important part of our work to make sure that people in our city are in safe and stable housing. And often for, significantly less money per person or per unit. So again, not in any way to diminish the impact of our long-term investments in building new affordable housing. But over the years I've been in office, we've added so many more strategies for our overall pool of funding, including preserving naturally occurring affordable housing, tenant support like this one. And I think, again, I'm going to be just like an annoying broken record on this theme, but when we create new policy or we create new direction, in order for it to be successful, we have to resource it or it isn't real. So I just think this is a critical piece of our overall package of work to make sure that tenants who are vulnerable are protected, and really appreciate this motion.
Thank you. I do want to call on our budget director. Despite the fact that we look at these as they get written a couple times with a few different sets of eyes, I think that maybe this should go to another fund, Director Intermill.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And to Councilmember Cunningham's points, the intent is for this to be a revolving set of funds for the tenant relocation fee program. And so in the haste to get the work done, we had put this into the general fund. I think it would more appropriately be more appropriate for the expenditures to be budgeted out of the 01900 fund, the Regulatory Services Special Revenue Fund, and for the $100,000 to be transferred from the general fund to the Regulatory Services Special Revenue Fund, so that that's where the dollars could be spent from. That then will allow the revolving to occur and for these monies to not fall then back into the general fund once the assessments are made. I do appreciate Director of Regulatory Services Kim Keller for catching that this afternoon and reminding the Budget Office of that intent, and just wanted to reconfirm with Councilmember Cunningham that that's the intent, and then we can make sure to clean it up on the back end as we implement this budget.
Councilmember Cunningham, do you concur?
I concur, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right, are there any other questions from council members? Seeing nothing further, we have amendment number 5 by Councilmember Cunningham. I will ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Chair Palmisano.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Moving on to amendment number 6, authored by council members Johnson and Gordon. Director Intermail.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, amendment number 6 is a motion by council members Johnson and Gordon, amending the 2021 Mayor's recommended budget in the 01 SNR fund for the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department on a one-time basis, increasing the expense budget for neighborhood engagement and support by $416,000, and drawing down the unobligated fund balance generated by interest earnings on unspent NRP funds. These monies are to be used to increase the 2021 base funding level under the neighborhood's 2020 formula to $25,000 per neighborhood per year, prorated to $12,500 per neighborhood for the months of July through December 2021, as well as a corresponding increase in the Equitable Engagement Fund of $208,000. Staff in the Neighborhood and Community Relations and Finance and Property Services departments are directed to develop a set of options for increasing the total annual pool of funding for neighborhoods 2020 by $3 million, which will include a minimum base funding of $25,000 per neighborhood per year, beginning with funding year 2022. These options shall be presented to the City Council Committee, whose jurisdiction includes neighborhoods, no later than April 1st, 2021.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson, would you like to speak to this amendment?
Certainly, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to. So colleagues, Councilmember Gordon and I are bringing forward this amendment after working with staff and identifying a funding source that is supportable, preferable for this work. This is out of the interest earnings from unspent funds within the NCR department. You know, why are we bringing this forward? With the recent passage of the Neighborhoods 2020 plan, we passed a great racial equity formula, which addresses one side of the equation. It's also true that we did not at that time address the other input, which is the pool of money, because that's what the budget process is for. So racial equity formula, great. Pool of money, the problem that is created around the current pool of money and its size is twofold. First, if we want to undo hundreds of millions of dollars of disinvestment over decades that were racially inequitable, we are going to need more than just a few $1,000,000 moving forward. Simply changing the racial equity formula without also changing the pool of funding is not enough. Second, it puts the neighborhood networks at risk with the base funding for each neighborhood. Now I'm going to quote from our own plan that we unanimously passed why that is a problem. Our plan says neighborhood level community organizing and the neighborhood associations that support it play a critical role in keeping residents informed, connected to their community, and empowered to guide and influence decisions that affect their lives. Through past and current efforts, neighborhood organizations have helped improve safety, celebrate diversity, build community, preserve housing stock, promote economic vitality, foster a sustainable environment, and improve health throughout the city. So our own plan is saying it is really important to maintain these neighborhood organizations across the city. Unfortunately, with the pool of funding we have today, at the rate that the base level is dropping per neighborhood association, it is obvious, I believe, that we are going to see some neighborhood organizations that are no longer able to serve the thousands of residents that each of them represents, and therefore no longer able to move in the ways that they have or could on these particular issues that are of critical importance to the city. And that includes the racial equity work. And so what we are asking here today is not to solve the whole problem during this budget. We understand that there are a lot of budget constraints right now, given the unprecedented revenue situation that we are currently facing. So what we are looking at is really stabilizing at $25,000 per neighborhood for 2021, and then asking staff to look at some different budget options that could come forward to meet that ask of $3 million moving forward in future years. I will note that that would be something that then we would have to take separate action on in deciding whether we proceed with any of those options. So we are not making any sort of decision on proceeding with $3 million increase in the pool every year starting in 2022. That would have to be a separate decision by this council, but to come back with options so that we could evaluate what are some potential paths towards doing that within the budget. So we think this is given the pandemic and the revenue situation that we are in, and also the needs around advancing this important work, we think this is a good win-win situation for this particular budget, and we would ask you to support this, and happy to stand for any questions. Oh, and I'd like to turn over to my colleague, Councilmember Gordon, as well. I'm sure he's got comments as well.
Thank you. I do want to point out first that there's been a request by Council President Bender to divide this into two items. That courtesy is given. Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you. And if Councilmember Bender was in queue before me, that's fine if she speaks as well. And Andrew did do a good job of kind of presenting the rationale here. I know that we've been talking about the future of our neighborhood organizations for a long time. At one point, we all agreed on an amount of base funding that we expected. Given the funds that we have, the recommendation that came back and what they were looking at for the total amount we'd given them was adjusted. I think this is a modest proposal to try to add to two funds equally for next year, so that we can reduce the potential harm that it might have on some neighborhood organizations with the reductions in funds. So at least it will hold them to $25,000 for the year. And then it sets up an opportunity for us to look more carefully into the future and what we could do. The 3 million figure is something that we've heard from lots of neighborhood associations and groups out there, so it should be familiar to a lot of council members. And that's why we thought it was worth giving it some deeper study, because it certainly has been studied at length by our communities.
Thank you. Council President Bender, did you also want to speak?
It was just a request to divide the budget action for this year and the staff direction piece. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Osman.
Yes, I just want to show my support this amendment by Councilmember Johnson and Gordon. Neighborhood community plays huge role in my community specifically. Community safety planning, racial equity, and even as picking up needles on the street. They play a huge role. They educate residents with tenant rights and advocate for the residents, those that don't have the voice. So we do need to invest community and people that are doing the work hands-on, and I'm here to support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, as a member of the work group that really worked hard throughout the year on this plan for Neighborhoods 2020, and I may even say reluctantly. However, you know, we really put a lot of time in trying to address the significant racial inequities in our NRP program. And I recognize that this is not necessarily a shift in budgets. I mean, it comes from unspent NRP funds. However, it just continues to perpetuate the same challenges that we've had with the NRP program in the past. And so I just wanted to just point that out and maybe even ask the authors if they can speak to that issue a little bit.
Sure. Would either of the authors like to speak to that? Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate that concern because I think that's on the forefront of our minds as authors of this. And that's also why we are increasing the Equitable Engagement Fund so that more work can be done in a racially equitable way around this. And even when you think about the $3 million, and now that's, you know, a whole separate thing, like I mentioned, but even of that, the majority of that goes to racial equity work as well, if you run that through the formula. So it does not dilute what the formula is doing. And that's why I think it's a win-win, because it's increasing funding for racial equity and also addressing these concerns around the base funding. And I guess I'd just turn it over to Councilmember Gordon to see if he has any comments as well on this piece of it.
Councilmember Gordon, did you also want to comment?
I think that Councilmember Johnson covered it well, but we're certainly trying to be consistent and be sensitive to the whole Neighborhoods 2020 plan, and that's why we were actually adding revenue to both of those two funding sources.
Thank you. Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a no on this, and I want to speak a little bit to why. I do think it's important that we honor the work of the Neighborhoods 2020 group and the equity goals of that. And that being said, I'm not necessarily opposed to putting more money into neighborhoods. If we lived in a world where there was just abundance and we could fund everything that we want to, it would be somewhere on my list, but we don't live in that world. We're in a COVID budget that's very, very tight, and we have to make choices. And I just want to point out for all of my colleagues that part of the Safety for All proposal that we proposed moves crime prevention specialists into NCR. And so this money that's in NCR could be used as part of the both and consensus funding proposal that everybody's looking for. This is money that could get used for mental health response. This is money that could get used to take pressure off of that discussion if people so chose. And so for me, I am not prepared to vote for funding for neighborhoods over mental health response and violence prevention and police accountability that are currently unfunded in our ongoing discussions. And so I think it's, this is something that I want to, just really lift up, that we have to make choices. And I'm especially concerned about the idea of just giving a general direction to find $3 million, which is a way of sort of signaling support for something without making any choices at all. And I don't think that's what we got sent here for. And I actually think it's pretty inappropriate. I think that we need to be actually signaling what our values are in a way that lets voters know if we're representing them or not in this conversation. And I feel like there's a lot of, sometimes the conversation about both and turns into a sort of wishful thinking about what if we could just kind of do everything and I'm just going to say stuff I like. And so, like, it's cool that you like neighborhoods and that you want to fund them. And I like neighborhoods too and can see funding them. But I want us to be clear that we're making choices in this budget, and I can't support something that just says go find $3 million, but doesn't acknowledge that $3 million is going to have to come from somewhere.
Thank you. I do want to clarify that, colleagues, while we're speaking to to this entire motion number 6, there has been the interest in splitting them up. So I would suggest we continue talking about both the entirety of the amendment, but we will take 2 separate votes on it. Council President Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that clarification. Some of what I was interested in saying has already been said. I guess I just want to underscore Council Vice President's points and leadership. And I guess I'm just concerned about the notion that there's such a thing as race equity work that's separate from work, regular work. I mean, everything we do should be grounded and based in race equity. And for some reason, we have to hire consultants from Cura to help us see the inequities in our system. And then even when we do, have a long process or years of study or staff time or consultants or maps showing us in glaring red color the inequity that our system has created. It seems to be ignored, and it seems to be such a desire to still think of race equity as some separate addition to our work when it should be. And this body has repeatedly stated a value of integration of race equity into everything we do. And so I asked to split the items because I think, like other colleagues have said, or at least one, I think similarly to Councilmember Fletcher, had we found support for the highest priority that we've heard in all of our budget hearings to fund safety, I could feel more comfortable supporting the first item, but we haven't reached that theoretical consensus that people say exists. And the second one, I just can't imagine supporting. I mean, I'm vehemently opposed to asking our staff to redo the work they've already done. They've brought us their recommendation. If folks disagree with it, they should just, continue to bring budget amendments or asking our staff to redo the work they've already done over and over again if we don't agree with it. So I guess to me, I just really take to heart how much time has gone in over so many years to try and to really shift this system. I'm also a little bit, I'm very optimistic about the Equitable Engagement Fund and the possibilities it holds. It's also new, and we don't know if, if it will yield, the specific outcomes we're looking for. I mean, it's already funded through the new proposal, and I'm glad that it is, and we should fund it. We should implement the recommendations. So I just note that that dynamic. And finally, I do want to just say, because this is also part of a bigger decision, that I have just seen such a huge shift in my neighborhood organizations in Ward 10 that serve some of the populations that are targeted through the new policy framework. And they've just done such an extraordinary job with the resources they have. to, really increase outreach to non-English speaking residents, to really take on like really challenging issues around, housing stability and finding food for people who are going hungry in this pandemic. And the issues that are facing neighborhoods in Ward 10 are not the same across the board. And those organizations who are taking on those really hard challenges, I think, is really the purpose of creating this equity lens. So thank you again for the support for taking those two separate votes as well.
Thank you. Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll just say that as the co-chair for the Neighborhoods 2020 work group, as well as the committee chair that has been responsible for Neighborhoods 2020 and NCR, that I wasn't consulted related to this, which is fine. I don't necessarily take that personally, but I do think that I have quite a bit of work and being in the details of this work now the entire time, and would have something to offer to that. I will say that we paid for a contract from Cura to do an analysis, and out of that analysis was where the recommendation came from to lower the base funding so that we had a larger racial equity impact. I support neighborhood organizations. Neighborhood organizations, speak in my ward, do really great work. The issue that I have right now in this very moment, as we are navigating these various budget decisions, is that the biggest, Councilmember Fletcher spoke to this, the biggest thing that our constituents are talking to us about, that are demanding around safety, folks have prioritized a both and. Again, with the CPSs moving, we could have put money towards training them. We could, for different sort of neighborhood mediation and restorative justice practices, so that we could be building out that both and that folks keep talking about and don't see in the Safety for All budget. So for me, if we are living within financial constraints, I just have concerns about us kicking the can down the road around public safety and then putting money into work that's not life or death. So that is a concern that I have in terms of our priorities as council members, wanting to make sure that we are investing where the money is needed the most. And literally when it comes to life or death. I think we should listen to the recommendations of the steering committee around this. In 2021, the neighborhood organizations will still. So I think that it would be helpful for folks to understand that this is a phased tiering of funding. So I think that's what I'm a little bit challenged with here. So I think I might need some better understanding of what this first item does. So if I could get some clarification on that. But then to the second point with the staff direction, from my perspective as a policymaker, I don't find the staff direction to be appropriate because it's our job to do what we're asking the staff to do. We should be doing the work of digging in, working alongside staff, and then bringing forward that work during the budget process ourselves, rather than asking staff to go back through. We ask them to operate in a budget neutral space. That is the work that they've done. They've given us good, solid recommendations. I don't support putting them in this situation where they have to take money from other departments and I don't want to put staff in that position. I think that is our job as policymakers to do so. So I do not support that. And further, if we are likely going to continue to see financial constraints from COVID, and also lawsuits and financial risk related to the police department. I don't feel comfortable with us prioritizing finding $3 million for neighborhood associations when right now a part of our conversation is the private sector funding our violence prevention work. So so that's my 2 cents on this. I would like to be able to get some clarification about how this funding, this base funding is different. So if I can maybe get some clarification on that.
Council member, the next person in queue is one of the authors. So if he doesn't satisfy your question in his remarks, then we will circle back to staff. Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, to answer that question, it essentially adds $2,500 for each neighborhood to the base. Because if you look at what the Neighborhood 2020 plan proposes, it really, and what the council approved, the CPP stays in there through July 1st or to July 1st. So that's really for the second half of the year that it is touching the formula. And then in terms of my comments, I was on the Neighborhoods 2020 steering work group as well. I was there for every meeting. We are not asking staff to redo work, as was stated before. In fact, staff and Cura repeatedly said the funding pool is not something we are going to make any recommendations on. That is council's decision. The appropriate place for that is during the budget discussions. That is why we are here. So it is at best disingenuous to suggest somehow that the recommendations that came our way said, keep the total pool the same in funding. That's not true at all. It's our job to look at the pool and decide if it's enough. We can see in the outcomes that it is funding neighborhood associations less than $25,000 per neighborhood. If you look at the actual work that they need to do, the extensive list, and I can actually pull up, maybe I'll do that. I'll quick pull up. Let's go over just some of the things that they are asked to do. And by the way, we have to ask, is it realistic to do these things for where we're headed is $10,000 per neighborhood. So $10,000 per neighborhood, hold an annual election meeting and elections, onboarding and training new board members, hosting and staffing board meetings throughout the year, accounting, financial compliance, taxes, reports, audits, legal compliance, bylaws, maintaining and updating manuals of policies, procedures, and practices, running a website and social media accounts, grant writing, contract management, navigating employment laws, and other requirements such as workers' compensation and insurance, and meaningfully engaging thousands of residents for $10,000. That's ridiculous. Nobody can do that for that little amount. Now, the reason that not every single neighborhood is going to go under because of that is because there are a lot of neighborhoods that are actually getting more through the formula given our current pool. And that's a good thing. They should have more than $25,000. Every neighborhood association should have more than $25,000, and the funding should be done in a racially equitable way. And that's a decision we have to make as policymakers. My colleagues have commented about the constraints on the budget. I get it. That's why Councilmember Gordon and I are not trying to solve all of the future years at once, and why this is such a modest in terms of $25,000 or $2,500 per neighborhood adjustment. So that's where we're at for it. I understand some of our colleagues are going to vote against it. I also just got to say, I do think it is, fair to bring up that you think there are higher priorities and all of that. It does feel a little inappropriate to me when colleagues say, maybe I'd be feeling more generous on this if we had voted yesterday for their budget amendment. That's a little concerning when we're putting it in those kind of terms. I think we can all look at these amendments each. If you don't want to support this because you feel like your amendment has more needs or this is a potential source of funding, I totally get that. But I don't want the public to have any sort of impression of, your support on one motion or amendment is contingent on another, because that's not the case. That's not how we should operate. I don't actually think any of my colleagues are operating that. I certainly hope they weren't suggesting that, but I know that language might be misinterpreted as suggesting that. So I just want to make that clear as well.
Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I probably could support some amended version of this. When I think about the neighborhoods in my ward, I think about the fact that they're doing great work. Some of them are doing great work. I also have seen for myself and also have heard from colleagues about, you know, we have a ton of neighborhoods in our city that are known for sort of generating the racial inequities that we're talking about here. And so not every, and so if I was making this decision based purely off of what I've seen from a handful of neighborhoods in my ward, and I know Councilmember Cunningham would probably feel the same, you know, we're really satisfied with that work, but it's not about a handful of organizations doing the best work. It's about the whole and what the whole is accomplishing. And I do think that that there's some version of this where it's appropriate to increase the Equitable Engagement Fund so that folks can apply for more money. And I'm open to some argument about, you know, increasing the base funding and how that sort of gets us somewhere. But I do agree that with everyone having to sort of operate within some constraints, that it feels like to do all of this is a lot. And so that's sort of where I'm sitting. I'm open to the discussion. I'm not fully there in terms of my support for the language as written. And then for the staff direction, you know, I think that's a conversation that we should be having year to year. I think that we need to see some, you know, some demonstration, some showing proof. I don't think I'd be supporting the staff direction.
Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to clarify my comments. It's been many long days in a row. I'm looking at the budget as a whole, our $1.5 billion. I'm thinking about what our priorities that I've heard during our 8 hours of testimony the other night. And that is the lens through which I am looking at this, and mentioned the difficulty of supporting this at this time with so many loose ends related to what was the highest priority we heard about. I also think there's lots of opportunity to invest these fund dollars that are coming through the new program in a lot of the things that we heard about both at the hearings, and I'm sure all of us hear from constituents as community needs. So I think, you know, again, there's a lot of opportunity to use these dollars to meet community needs. I just am not in a place today to be able to support this proposal.
Councilmember Cunningham. Have we circled to also ask, have we answered the question that you had earlier?
Yes, it was. Thank you. I did want to just briefly follow up, and I apologize for jumping twice in the queue. I just want to speak specifically to the staff direction that I won't be supporting this staff direction, not because I don't think that we should be exploring whether or not we increase the base. I think that it's not right for us to put staff in a position to have to go dig into other departments' budgets and ask and find where money is that we could fill that. That is our job as policymakers. I feel like this really is just an opportunity to make like a larger statement of we support neighborhood associations, and I support neighborhood associations. I have great neighborhood associations in my ward. I just don't think it's fair for us to put staff in this particular position. We can say we support exploring, expanding the base of funding if it's available to neighborhood associations. I think it's possible for us to say that publicly and on the record without having to put our staff in this particular position, when it's really our job to do that digging and to make those hard choices, not them. I don't have an issue with the first one. It's one-time dollars. I mean, I think we've made the point at this point, like, public safety is the biggest priority, and like it's really hard to make these decisions when we have not made decisions related to public safety. We're committing money to lower priorities that's not life or death, and that is not me saying because we didn't vote in favor of what I brought forward related to public safety. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that that is the top priority for our constituents, as that was made abundantly clear after our nearly 8-hour public hearing. And now we're making pretty big funding decisions when we could be really looking at this as opportunities, again, to build out the both and that folks feel has not yet been brought to the table. So, I mean, I'll support the first one because, you know, let's give it a try. But I mean, I just have to say, it doesn't feel great that we're being put into a position where we're not prioritizing that. So with that, thanks, I appreciate it.
Thank you. If there's nothing further, we have this split into two motions, and I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on what we're going to call 6A, which is the top paragraph, exclusive of the staff direction. Clerk?
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Fletcher.
No.
Fletcher.
No.
Chair Palmisano.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes and 1 nay.
Thank you. That motion carries. Next, we have the second part of this motion, which is the second paragraph that we'll
Mr.
call
Clark.
6B.
Madam Chair, I'm so sorry. I was doing something else and came back in. I would like to be recorded as a no for that 6A.
Sure. Thank you, clerk. So noted.
I will make that adjustment.
Thank you. And then when you are ready, could you call the roll on the second motion, which is the second paragraph?
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Cunningham.
No.
Ellison.
No.
Osman.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
No.
Kano.
Aye.
Bender.
No.
Schrader.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Fletcher.
No.
Chair Palmisano.
Aye.
There are 8 ayes and 5 nays.
Thank you. That motion carries. Next, we'll move to amendment number 7. Director Intramural, would you read the motion first?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, amendment number 7 is a motion by Councilmember Palmisano, amending the 2021 Mayor's recommended budget in the general fund for the Communications Department on a one-time basis, increasing the expense budget in communications by $100,000 to provide funding for a temporary FTE authorized under resolution number 2020R-284 in support of public safety strategies, and transferring $100,000 of cash balance from the 01 SNR fund to the general fund. Members, just for clarification here, the 01 SNR fund is the same source of funding that you saw on the previous amendment. This is a fund that is utilized to collect interest earnings on unspent NRP dollars. You're going to see a series of amendments now that utilizes that one-time funding source, and just wanted to mention that at the get-go here.
Thank you for that clarification. I'm going to put myself in queue just to speak briefly to my own motion. You may recall, colleagues, that in October, we authorized a temporary position for communications to support our community safety strategies. It's Resolution 1043. That position was expected to be in place for the remainder of 2020 and actually through 2021. The action in October anticipated that the funding for 2021 would be appropriated in the budget process. So here we are. Staff can comment because they're the ones that went and suggested and found the money for this. It didn't feel appropriate or like it should be part of the technical amendments package, but I invite our city coordinator, Mr. Ruff, to provide a few comments about it. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Palmisano. I'm Mark Ruff, the city coordinator. Also available is Greta Bergstrom, the Director of Communications. I think you summarized it very well, Madam Chair. This is pursuant to an action in October and was contemplated to assist the extra effort that is associated with the engagement process around public safety strategies that is contemplated through 2021. So we certainly look forward to the work and the resources to support the health department and all of the departments working around public safety strategies.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from council members? I'm not seeing anyone in the queue. This was pretty recent, so I think people remember the discussion from last time. Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you. I see that we're transferring $100,000 of cash balance from this 01 SNF fund. Could I get the total cash balance that we have in that fund right now?
Director Intermill, do you have that available?
Madam Chair and Councilmember Gordon, in total, in the 01 SNR fund, which is again the same source from your previous amendment number 6 along with Councilmember Johnson, there is approximately $1.2 million available. And the series of amendments that you will see, amendments, again, your number 6 through amendment number, excuse me, I'm scrolling through, amendment 6 through amendment number 11, all utilize that source. So again, 1.2 million available, all but $27,000 is being used.
All right, $27,000. Make note of that, colleagues.
Are there any other comments or questions about this motion? Seeing none, we have this amendment number 7 authored by myself on the community safety strategies communications piece, and I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Chair Palmisano.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Next, we have motion number 8 by council members Jenkins, Kano, Ellison, and Reich. Mr. Intermill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, amendment number 8 is a motion by council members Jenkins, Kano, Ellison, and Reich, amending the 2021 mayor's recommended budget in the general fund for the city coordinator on a one-time basis, increasing the expense budget in the arts, culture, and creative economy unit by $52,000 to fund 3 months of 2 grant-funded FTEs through year end, and transferring $52,000 of cash balance from the 01 SNR fund to the general fund.
Thank you. Which of these colleagues would like to speak to the motion, if they would like to speak to the motion? Or is there anybody else that would have questions for these around this motion? Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, I think we discussed this pretty in-depthly during
the previous motion.
Motion and the other day, but this this is the budget portion of the action that we took at POGO.
Thank you. If there's nothing further, we have amendment number 8, authored by council members Jenkins, Cano, Ellison, and Reich, and I will ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Cano.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Chair Palmisano.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Moving on to motion number 9. Mr. Intermill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, motion number 9, or amendment number 9, excuse me, is a motion by Councilmember Palmisano amending the 2021 Mayor's recommended budget in the general fund for the Internal Audit Department on a one-time basis to contract for an after-action review of the 2020 civil unrest, increasing the expense budget for internal audit by increasing the expense budget for internal audit by $230,000 and transferring $230,000 of cash balance from the 01 SNR fund to the general fund.
Thank you. I'll just speak briefly to my own motion on this. This is more of a motion from the body. As chair, I'm just carrying this work. We've heard presentations in the past about what something like this would be comprised of, and there has been an active RFP that internal audit has been heavily involved in helping to seek and weighing some of the different alternatives before us. I do have the audit director, Mr. Patrick, available if there are any questions or comments or people would like to hear more. But I will go ahead and first wait to see if there's any questions or comments from council members or if that's desired.
My colleagues work on tenant rights advocacy.
Councilmember Gordon.
I think an after-action report and review seems reasonable. This seems like a lot of money to spend on it right now out of this fund, especially at this stage in budget amendments, because it could limit our options for future flexibility, given the fact that after Amendment 11, we'll only have $27,000 left in the 01 SNR fund.
Director Intermill, I want to clarify with you that the idea that there would be $27,000 left in the fund was assuming it was inclusive of this amendment, right? And generally agreed on as the right source from the city enterprise and the finance staff to fund such an effort?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Councilmember Gordon. So yes, the $27,000 remaining balance would be after all of these amendments through number 11 were adopted. A little bit more about the fund. The NRP monies will, as they remain unspent, will continue to generate interest earnings. And some of those interest earnings are budgeted to be reinvested back into the neighborhood's programming. However, anything that is not budgeted to be spent there does just sort of accrue in this fund. And so this would draw the available resource, if all of these things are adopted, it would draw the available resource in the fund down to $27,000. But that balance would have the potential to grow and would likely grow in future years.
I understood that. That's what I was saying is if this passes and the others pass, will be to 27,000. Thanks.
Councilmember Schrader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think in light of the questions, it would be good to hear from the budget director. Some background, I originally, I'm sure other of my colleagues have done this as well, but reached out to Director Lane as well as Director Ryan about doing an after action report. This happened, much earlier in this year to really look at, what what we can learn from the action review. So it would be helpful to hear, from the director, what work has been done, why this amount is what we're looking at, and what we are hoping to gain by spending this money.
That sounds good. I just wanted to move faster if people wanted to. Director Patrick is on the line. Mr. Patrick?
Thank you, Chair Palmisano. I'm Ryan Patrick. I'm the interim internal audit director. So in July, Council received a presentation outlining the steps to address the city's response to the summer civil unrest. So I, along with a number of staff from around the city, met to determine where the work could be positioned, and internal audit took the lead. We're a neutral party, not involved in emergency response, and we're used to working on projects across the enterprise, so we could be a neutral conduit to help assist in the third-party review. So to date, we've completed an extensive vetting process that included the RFP process, reviewing applications, and received a number of them with a range, but all generally around the amount that you see listed in this amendment, to review the actions between the 25th of May and the 3rd of June. This would, the project would include both significant research and work with internal department staff who are involved in the actions, but we really stress the importance of community engagement and input. And so this project will entail a lot of that as well. It involves participation across a lot of departments and certainly a lot going on. So amongst the bids we received, again, they were around that amount and could provide a significant amount of information for the city.
Thank you. Councilmember Cunningham. Councilmember Cunningham?
Yeah, thanks. I just took a second. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just say that, these sort of after action evaluations are really, really important so that we can learn from our mistakes as an enterprise and do better moving forward. However, they really don't mean much if we don't actually use them as learning tools. There was, after the 4th precinct occupation, and everything that took place related to that followed after Jamar Clark was murdered, there was a lot of those recommendations and a lot of that insight was not really taken seriously or implemented. So I would just really strongly encourage folks, like, as we are investing this money, that we actually are also committing to taking that information and doing something with it, or else that is $230,000 that was put towards something that is now a document. I can't really say collecting dust on a bookshelf, but collecting dust in a file folder on a computer. I don't know. We have to actually take what we get from this and really do something with it and change our operations, reorient ourselves, change paradigms where necessary. So I just really want to say that, my vote yes for this is also voting yes, that I'm actually as a policymaker committing to following through with what we learn from this. And I hope that we learn from the mistakes of the past of not following through. So I would just say, let's commit to this. Let's see it all the way through. Thanks.
Thank you. Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam Chair. I am really, I don't know if I can support this because we are not, the civil unrest has not ended. I have a autonomous zone in my ward that is a direct result from the civil unrest, and that situation has not resolved. And so we can't do a audit of the after action review until after the action. And the action is still happening right now.
I appreciate those comments. I'm going to go through the queue and then ask if Director Patrick would respond, because I receive biweekly updates on this matter. Council President Bender.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I guess I'm curious. isn't there an opportunity to approach the new Department of Justice administration for the kind of after action report that they would have typically provided to cities in the past? I know we have had a challenging 4 years in a really different scenario, but after Jamar Clark was killed and the situation at the 4th Precinct, the Department of Justice completed an after action report. It's been pointed out to us many times, and I will acknowledge that the city has not done a great job of implementing those recommendations from 2015, which sit for us to continue to consider. So I guess, why don't we just wait and see? I mean, why don't we ask the new Department of Justice to take this on? This must be a very high priority for them, given the national and international impact it had.
Sure. I'm going to ask Director Patrick to respond to some of these questions. Mr. Patrick?
Thank you, Chair Palmisano. To Councilmember Cunningham's point, I think positioning this work in internal audit is a good idea. We have a long history, and it's part of our business practices to follow up on all recommendations and reports and make sure that they're implemented. It's just part of the audit process. So I'm excited about this opportunity to have some of this work live in audit. And the idea of getting this started in January was so that we could not just let it linger and start getting continuous feedback throughout the entirety of the after action. It's going to take a significant amount of time to complete, but we could get the ball rolling in January and be receiving real-time feedback from the experts in this field as they complete the project. As it stands, we could be positioned to begin this work in January and start getting that feedback as soon as possible.
And to Council Vice President Jenkins' concern that some of the unrest isn't over yet, how do we define the scope of that project?
The scope of the project was limited to the actions between the 25th of May and the 3rd of June, but I would note that obviously what occurred then will obviously have ramifications moving forward in how we respond to future events. But this after action review was scoped for that time period.
Thank you. I appreciate some of the things that I've heard in some of these updates, that who we consider as part of the stakeholders to go out and speak to about something like this is not just official jurisdictions. It's not just employees of or first responder organizations, but one of the great and important stakeholders to get their view and input on and how we might do better in the future are people in the community. And that's just something that I've not seen before in an after action review. So I really appreciated that. The other piece is that I think the eagerness to get started was so that we could loop back and we could learn from it. I go in with the same questions and concerns that you do, Councilmember Cunningham, about not wanting this to be a nice, huge document that isn't actually used and isn't actually used to improve things. I also think, or rather I know, that we could ask the firm to come in and do a presentation in January after the contract is awarded to get feedback from the City Council. This isn't something that has been my own project by any means. My understanding is that this was the will of the council. So if that isn't the case, then that's fine too. Council President Bender.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I remember that conversation too, and I think it was initiated because we were turned down for applications from kind of the normal processes. At least that's what I remember our Director of Emergency Management reporting out. I guess, can you share more information about the scope or staff, the scope of this? Is it, and what actions it's intended to review? And let me know if that's not specific enough. I'm happy to provide more.
Yeah, Director Patrick.
Yeah, so it is intended to review primarily the actions of police, fire, 911, Office of Emergency Management, city leadership and mutual aid and supporting agencies. So the actions that were taken as a response to the civil unrest that occurred during that time period. Primarily, one of the first items is developing a comprehensive timeline of all the activities that took place during that time period, and then delving into each of those items in the decision making that occurred to really flesh out how things played out as they did. So it's a holistic assessment of the city's response to the civil unrest, including community input and obviously all the information that city staff can provide.
And does it include the death of George Floyd, or is that a separate matter?
No, Council President Bender, this includes the actions following the death of George Floyd. So that review of that incident is not a part of this project.
Okay.
Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do want to affirm that I am absolutely supportive of doing a after action review. So how would we review this scenario of at this point, 6 months of quote civil unrest, and the lack of response, or how will we figure out what were the best practices, what were the mistakes, the missteps that we made along the way? Where would that come in?
Mr. Patrick?
So amongst the various proposals, we have a variety of national experts in emergency response, fire, public safety, who've worked on these types of projects before. So they would be conducting the assessment and comparing it to both best practices and kind of emerging trends in handling situations such as the one that happened this summer. So they would be providing the feedback back to the city, but after extensive conversations and meetings and work with city staff to truly understand what happened along with the community. And certainly I think requesting whoever's selected to come and present and take feedback from city staff about how they'll be conducting their review and specifically what they're looking at and the type of feedback we'd like sooner rather than later, I think could certainly be done.
Are there any other questions, Council Vice President?
Thank you. I'm not sure if the question was answered. I mean, Mr. Patrick talked about the events of the summer, but he didn't directly respond to my question about this unresolved issue that we're not sure when it's going to end.
Mr. Patrick, did you want to answer?
I think it's a tough question to answer as the situation's currently ongoing. I think this after action review was intended to examine that time period that I mentioned, and perhaps results that continue to go on because of what occurred during that time period may be beneficial in looking at how we're currently responding to events that are occurring. May result from this report. I'm not sure I'm fully answered your question, but that would be my understanding of how this could benefit even something that's still currently ongoing.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you.
Councilmember Ellison.
I'm a little concerned about what I'm hearing in terms of the scope of this review, especially if the sort of triggering incident won't be considered or won't be a part of the review. I think I'm struggling to wrap my mind around how that could even occur. And my worst case scenario is that we have a review that pretends that the city spontaneously combusted and that there was no inciting incident. it'd be a bit like if someone slapped another person and you went to go investigate the redness on their cheek without consideration of the slap. It's like, well, I don't understand what that would entail. And also I think that there are, things that occurred during that time, that I could see easily being overlooked. For instance, there were no marches or real protests on the north side during this time, but we had very targeted arson. There was at least one night of massive theft, and it was sort of related, but not intimately related to what was going on the south side. Like, how would those sort of like secondary and tertiary effects be included in this review? And I'll just say again, I have extreme concern that we would do an after-action review without reviewing the murder of George Floyd itself and its impact. Otherwise, we're just sort of examining an unrest with no context. It sounds like.
As the author, I'm going to just briefly speak to that. Those are fundamentally different types of audit, is my understanding, right? The audit of how of the incident around George Floyd is one incident that definitely does have its own after-action review process already outlined. And then separately, our own internal audit office through audit committee has added 3 types of audits to improve policing as a result of that incident. One of them is about MPD's involvement in the post-licensing process and how we can have better outcomes that way. One is an audit on our field training officer program, and one is about auditing our after-action reviews in the police department. All of those are specific and pertinent more toward the policing incident surrounding George Floyd. I think that my understanding of this after-action review is that this is about how things go, how we could have done better as a whole city in the aftermath of it, and only in the aftermath of it, in such a way to learn quickly from it and to implement procedures so that we can get better. I was going to call on our city coordinator, Mr. Ruff, to see if he had any other thoughts or comments about some of these very, very real concerns that if I hadn't been getting updates on this, I'm not sure, I bet I would have as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would certainly defer to Director Patrick on the specifics of the RFP, but I think these are all very important questions that the council is raising, and at least could be a conversation with the selected respondent as what kind of additional scopes of work could be added on to the actual published scope of work, and have a conversation, as was mentioned earlier, with the council. Certainly in concert with our city attorney's office about what the timing of some of those investigations would be vis-a-vis the court cases that are going on specific to the death of Mr. Floyd, and also to Council Vice President's matter, which is a monitoring of actions that have occurred. I think about the Nicolet Mall actions as well as 38th in Chicago that continue to cause stress in our system and certainly cause individual stress for those who are nearby or involved. So I would encourage that conversation, and certainly we could wait and revisit this in January if there's continued interest in the conversation.
Thank you. Mr. Patrick, was there anything else you wanted to add to that at this point?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, Councilmember Gordon and then Councilmember Fletcher.
I appreciate the conversation. Maybe we should have had more detail about what we really want to be studying, but I'm also concerned about this much money from this source. It seems like this is something more appropriate for our emergency contingency fund clearly we weren't budgeting in advance for civil unrest. And if we want to study it, it's because we had, and we have funds to look at these things. We should, I think, perhaps go there if we can't go right to the maybe the police department budget for the revenues. So I would maybe support it if it had some alternative funding sources, and maybe some clarity about what we're actually reviewing would assist too, but I don't think I can support it right now.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am generally supportive of this idea. I think it's very, very important that we do these studies. I think it's appropriate that it go to internal audit. I think we can work out the details, but I do just want to add my voice to the concern about the scope and to make sure that I think one of the answers that we need this kind of after action to answer is, what did we do in our response to the murder of George Floyd that contributed to there being unrest in the first place? So if we start with unrest, if there's an ideological framing of where do we start, right? Like, what's the moment that we say unrest started? And what are the things that contributed to people showing up angry, right? Obviously, they were angry about George Floyd. I also think that you could make a case that the misinformation from the PIO in the initial report was part of what created a sense of mistrust and confusion and anger that contributed to the crowd dynamic. I think you could make a case, and I think it would be good for us to have a study of what are the ways that we moved equipment in preparation for unrest in a way that almost guaranteed some sort of escalation in the way that, in the sort of operational posture that MPD took on. And I think we need to look at all of those things and make sure that people have answers, because I think if you ask different people in the city, they would point to different factors that contributed to things reaching a boiling point. And I think it's very important that we have an analysis of that. And we can't start at the boiling point. We do have to ask, how did it get there? And what are the things we could have done potentially to help address people's trauma and create a different kind of an outcome in the crowd dynamic as everybody was mourning and grieving and expressing their anger. You know, were there mistakes made that we need to learn from? I think it's obvious from the way I'm asking the question that I think there were, but I want to make sure that the study actually looks at that and you know, gives us a more you know, rigorous answer to that question.
Thank you. I'll just say I really do mean what I say, but when I said it before, that I think we need to ask the firm selected to come in and do a presentation in January so that they can hear this feedback directly from council and proceed accordingly. Are there any other questions or comments? I'm going to just leave the funding as this source for now. I'm happy to entertain other sources if that's not the will of the body right now, but I will. Council Vice President Jenkins, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For clarity, has there been a firm already selected?
I'm going to pass that to Mr. Patrick to answer.
No, we're in the final phases now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Gordon.
No.
Cunningham. Cunningham.
Aye, sorry.
Ellison.
No.
Osman.
No.
Goodman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
No.
Kano.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Chair Palmisano.
Aye.
There are 9 ayes and 4 nays.
Thank you. That motion is adopted. Moving on to amendment number 10 by Councilmember Osman. Director Intramural.
Thank you, Chair Palmisano. Members, amendment number 10 is a motion by Councilmember Osman amending the 2021 Mayor's recommended budget in the general fund for the Community Planning and Economic Development Department on a one-time basis, increasing the expense budget by $95,000 for East African home ownership education and educational and advocacy services to East African tenants throughout Minneapolis, and transferring $95,000 of cash balance from the 01 SNR fund to the general fund. To the extent that outside support is necessary to deliver these services, staff are directed to prioritize selecting a Minneapolis-based nonprofit organization that can provide service in the Somali and Oromo languages and can demonstrate other cultural expertise to effectively serve the East African community.
Oops, sorry. Councilmember Osman, did you want to speak to your motion?
Yes, I do. My colleagues, our current tenant rights advocacy and home ownership programs are missing the mark in effectiveness with the East African community. This frustration was shared with me over the summer during the campaign with not just the resident of Ward 6, but many immigrant residents all over the city. And it was visible to me with my former role as a resident advocate, working with residents and advocating to keep them housed for 7 years. I have witnessed that the landlords and the property management send out nasty letters to residents and evict the residents with no due process. These people and these residents have all kind of barriers, mental health, language barriers, and some of them do not even know their rights as a tenant. Considering my word, almost all residents are renters in Ward 6, and we want to make sure we are protecting those individuals with the culturally specific and the language they understand. They want people that can work with them and that help them and make sure that these landlords do not continue abusing this resident and protecting their resident. In my time here as a council member, I will continue to advocate for tenants' rights. I will use every power I have and talk to all the departments that regulate tenants' rights, really pressure them to make sure they are focusing our immigrant, non-speaking English community in city of Minneapolis. This is more vital than ever right now as people can't pay their rent due to COVID-19 and community concern rise around the lifting of the rent protection from the federal or the state. I am asking your help to pass this amendment for specifically those individuals that are that have been dealing with this kind of treatment. And also, we want to make sure that we are providing those residents opportunity to have a home ownership education with the language they understand, with the specific cultural way they understand. There's a lot of barriers from East African community for buying homes. I have seen residents who live in low-income housing for 15, 20 years and haven't had the opportunity to know that, yes, there are resources out there. There's a state resource, city resource, federal resource for you to buy a home. And we want to make sure if we want to keep our residents home and our homeless residents that are on the streets, We want to make sure these units that individuals are becoming vacant so they can buy a house. We want to make sure we're providing those. This affordable or low-income housing or Section 8 housing is supposed to be a transition, a way people can advance with their career and jobs and then buy a home. And then the next individual person can come in. But it seems like what I have seen as an advocate resident for 7 years and what I have seen, those opportunities are not available in my community. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to speak or ask questions or comment on this? Councilmember Cano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I highly commend Councilmember Osman for bringing this item forward. I think he hits the nail right on the head on this. I can pretty much substitute every single word in here where you see East African with Latino, and the statement would be just as true. So I'm 100% supporting this amendment. And I just wanted to take the time to share that I think that this is a much more global problem shared across immigrant communities and communities who are multilingual. In the past, I would say 2 to 3 years, it's become more clear to me that our Latino success rates in this kind of program, moving people from renter status to home ownership status, getting them to go from home buyer education to the actual purchase agreement to moving in, the numbers aren't very good. And myself and staff tried to work on it a little bit. And I, of course, probably ended up doing work that is outside of my purview, in that typically I do try to play the bridge of, Spanish speaker and translator and interpreter and connector and so forth. And I think that I need to push us as a city to rely less on the labor of the council members of color to do the work that should be embedded in city departments and staffed by our own city staff as well. So this raises questions about, do we have Somali-speaking staff members in CPED housing that can help make more strategic recommendations about the work that we're doing in this front? Do we have Latino and Spanish-speaking staff members in CPED housing that can similarly do that work and reach that community in a way where that social capital is already embedded in the constitution of that staff member's very presence? And so I really appreciate this staff direction, because I think it helps me also push and think bigger about the kinds of things that we could do together with generally immigrant communities and home ownership rates. And of course, now under COVID-19 pressures, I think this work becomes even more significant and more important. So I would love to consider perhaps the staff direction next week, where we can tie some of these themes in a more, like I mentioned, in a more global way to address what I suspect is a deeper challenge of racial injustice and racial inequity within our own institution and our own city. And I know that we have a lot of community-based organizations that would be more than happy to advise us and support us and inform our strategies in that. I would also like to add that I think for a future staff direction that's connected to this kind of work, we should really look at evaluation. An evaluation of our own city systems and processes. A lot of times, I know that we tend to hire or fund external community groups to do certain work, but I haven't seen strong deliverables around tracking and evaluation. I know that in the past we've funded a lot of community-based efforts to help us around public safety and community-based initiatives around keeping our communities protected and safe, but we're horrible at tracking outcomes, at demonstrating results, at evaluating those efforts. And year after year, we reinvent those efforts, and then we fund new ones the following year. And so we just kind of chase our tail. We oftentimes just throw money at the problem and we say, vaya con Dios, figure it out, hope it goes well. But we don't really bring it back home to say what worked, what can we improve, how do we make this better for the next round. So kudos to you, Councilmember Osman, for bringing this up. I would love to partner with you on future work on this front that maybe ties immigrant communities more broadly together around homeownership rates. And it would be great to set some internal goals and outcomes for how many people we actually want to move into homeownership at the end of next year, so that we can be really explicit about our expectations and the work that we want to achieve. So thank you, and I'll be supporting this.
Thank you. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Osman, thank you for bringing this forward. I just want to reply to a couple of things that were mentioned by my friend and colleague, Councilmember Cano. We spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on home ownership education and advocacy services through Homeline and Legal Aid, as well as other organizations. I think there was a feeling that it wasn't moving deep enough into the East African community, which is why Councilmember Osman has made this request, probably due to language barriers, access, and a number of issues. Should anyone want to review the contracts and outcomes with these organizations, I would urge you to do so. People who have served on the Housing Policy Committee, as well as the committees before that, know that Homeline is very specific about their outcomes in great detail, by ward, by race, by outcome. So I do think that there are organizations who have the cultural competency that we already fund, but if there are areas missing, let's first take a look at what they're doing and see if we can improve the deliverables to the city. It's clear that they didn't have as good of deliverables in the East African community, so that's why this was brought forward. But I'm sure Ms. Brennan and others at CPED are happy to review the work we're doing, but you should know that very credible organizations like Homeline are doing this work, and I think they have good cultural capacity. I am supporting this today. I very much appreciate the way Councilmember Osman has moved towards this process instead of a direct appropriation, and I appreciate the ability to work with him. Thank you.
Thank you. Council President Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'm just so excited to have another council member who's really wanting to work on tenant stuff. So thank you, Councilmember Osman. Your leadership is going to be really important in this. I can see already. I did have a chance to check in with the council member, and like Councilmember Goodman talked about Homeline and its cultural capacity, but one advantage of one potential for this funding, I think, is to create a more proactive outreach. I mean, Homeline does so many things. They're an amazing organization. So I don't want to suggest that all they do is answer phone calls, but they are primarily, their sort of direct service is primarily, operating the hotline. They, of course, also do advocacy, both at the city and other cities around the state and at the state legislature, and are a really important part of taking all of those stories that they hear through their hotline to policymakers to advocate for change. So I think, one thing that this could do is add a layer that is a more proactive outreach. Again, I think always with the eye toward informing policy change, especially to address some of the things that Councilmember Cano raised with, just making sure that we're taking what we're hearing and gathering back and fixing those systems changes. I also just wanted to really agree with Councilmember Cano about the ways in which council members are doing work, especially the council members who speak other languages, or council members of color. It's something that it has been bothering me. I am working with the clerk on a staffing plan for future councils, maybe something, depending on how our budget looks next year, that I'll bring forward, kind of setting up for future terms. my experience as council president is that the demands of the council president's office are also not supported. And I think, our communications functions are not supported, but that's only one possible solution to the issue. And I think being clear about the different needs that council members are filling, that are parts of what many other departments do is worth really following up on. So I'd love to talk more about that. I don't want to belabor that now as part of Councilmember Osman's motion, but I didn't want to forget to mention it. So thanks.
Thank you. Seeing nobody else in queue, I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Chair Palmisano.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Next, we have a motion by Council Members Cunningham and Goodman that also pertains to this fund. And after this, I've gotten some feedback that after the 8-hour hearing and today's all-day meeting marathon, that some of the City Hall staff are absolutely exhausted. And I would suggest that maybe we close after this motion and adjourn to Monday instead of getting all the way through the 13 that we originally set out to do today. We'll pick the other 2 up at the beginning of Monday without objection. Let me know if you have any objections to that. But first, we'll have Director Intramural read this motion and go through this one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And for the record, I did not complain about how long we're going. I would be fine to go another 7, 8, 9, 10 or more amendments. Members, amendment number 11 is a motion by Council Members Cunningham and Goodman, amending the 2021 Mayor's recommended budget in the general fund for the Regulatory Services Department on a one-time basis, increasing the expense budget in the Minneapolis Animal Care and Control by $280,000 for the Animal Safety Net Pilot Program, and transferring $280,000 of cash balance from the 01 SNR fund to the general fund.
Thank you. Council Members Cunningham or Goodman, would you like to speak to your motion?
I can go ahead and jump into this.
Go ahead.
I'm very excited to bring this forward and to be of support to our Minneapolis Animal Care and Control staff. They do amazing work with very little funding and support. And so I wanted to speak specifically to this Animal Safety Net program. It's actually already been underway. This is going to be the first time that we're more sourcing it in a more intentional way. It is one-time dollars, but at least it's a step in the right direction for us to actually build out this much needed system in our Regulatory Services Department under the Minneapolis Animal Care and Control. So I want to just walk through, folks, all of the things that this covers, that this funding covers, and it's quite a lot, but I'll try to be quick. So the programs under the Animal Safety Net umbrella are the domestic violence program. So what is the reality is that animals and pets are actually frequently used by abusers to, they will either harm or kill pets as a way to abuse their domestic violence victims. So this is a safe way to keep animals out of the hands of people who will cause them harm. It includes emergency sheltering for pets whose pet parent is experiencing a medical emergency. It includes emergency sheltering for unexpected housing displacement due to disasters like fire. There's weekly low-cost vaccine and microchip clinics, a foster program for extended care of displaced owned animals. while they're displaced owned animals being housed while their owner recovers. It includes critical care assistance, which will be used to assist low-income individuals with emergency care for their pets. And it would include the field assistant program, which essentially that's a resource an officer can utilize in the field for instances where there's unintended neglect that has occurred because of income barriers or other reasons, but for which the animal has experienced limited suffering, and the issue can be easily remedied through humane education and moderate assistance rather than direct and immediate enforcement. So it helps expand the options that are available outside of just the hammer of enforcement, but also engagement and education. So this can include medical advice from the MACs, the MACC, their vets, grooming where they can help, as well as medical examination and prescriptions for medications. The officer can also, the animal care and control officers may also make referrals to other programs that can assist the owner in finding solutions and resolutions to issues that they might be experiencing. And that officer would work through the issue with the owner until it's corrected and resolved. So it's really very much so hands-on work that moves folks who are pet parents through the process of remediating any issues that they might be having. Now, I know that it's easy to be like, oh, he's the pet guy. I mean, in my room right now, in my office right now, I have 4 dogs from the MAC. So yes, I am very much so passionate about rescue animals, but I also want to implore that this is a public safety issue and that we also have a responsibility to protect animals in our city. Animals are disproportionately victims of violence. They are the first to be harmed when their pet parents get displaced for whatever reason, or they have a medical emergency and they can't be taken care of. There's all sorts of ways and reasons that this really helps to protect a literally voiceless constituency in our city that we are responsible for. We have Minneapolis Animal Care and Control. We do have that function, and we need to source it so that it can actually meet the needs of the constituency that we have asked for them to care for. We have phenomenal city staff who work in that department, truly innovative, hardworking. They scrape together nickels and dimes in order to make sure that they can do their best work. So I strongly request for our colleagues to please support this effort, and am very grateful to Councilmember Goodman for working alongside me with it. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the years that I've served on the City Council, we have moved from having an animal care and control unit that's been about collecting dogs, sweeping them up, putting them into vans, bringing them to a building and euthanizing them. We've come away from being an organization that has taken certain breeds and banned them and moved into an organization that's partnered with other organizations to adopt those that are hardest to adopt. We have not just sent sick and injured animals back out into the public, but we've hired a veterinarian to be able to do the kinds of care that are needed for these animals. And we have become more of a humane society type organization than a straight up law enforcement animal care and control. This effort is the next step in this direction. And from where I sit, here's why. Many, many people looking for affordable housing and who are unhoused have pets. They won't even go into housing much of the time because their pets are not included. Many victims of domestic violence are afraid to leave their abusers because they don't want to leave their beloved animal to the abuser. And many abusers hold animals over the heads of often women who are afraid to leave that level of abuse because they don't know what's going to happen to their pet. This is a step in the direction of saying that we understand what victims feel. victims and those in the community who have been very hard to help in the past. I really give Councilmember Cunningham a lot of credit, and I understand this is a very difficult budget year myself, but I do think that this is an effort that will reach those who are hardest to reach. These low income folks don't get their animals treated or vaccinated. And then we have more of a cost later on when we have to be dealing with euthanizing people's pets, picking them up from abusive situations. And so I give you a lot of credit, Councilmember Cunningham. I thought that Councilmember Johnson and I were the ones who cared the most about animals. We are developing a whole caucus of people who believe that animal welfare issues are very tied to other issues within our community, and I think this is a very good solution. I'm happy to be included in the work that you've already done.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to quick say thanks to my colleagues, Councilmember Cunningham and Goodman, for your leadership on this. You know, with everything going on, affordable housing and public safety and economic development and on, all these big, huge issues that are super important, it is easy for us not to talk enough about all the incredible work happening over at MAC. So I just want to express my gratitude and thanks to the team, Caroline, staff, the advisory board, all the volunteers, and everyone who supports MAC. You're doing great work, really appreciate it. And I'm glad we have an opportunity to talk about it because we don't get that opportunity enough and we need to do it more. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I support this effort and really appreciate the way that the authors have made the connections clear to the greater policy work we do. I will say I've heard some council members suggest that instead of investing city dollars in gun violence prevention, we should rely on philanthropy for that work. And I know we didn't finish our work in the violence prevention and transforming safety discussion. And so I will support this. I want to be very clear. I'm just stating my positions and thoughts. Is that I would feel pretty heartbroken if we couldn't find a way to increase our investments in gun violence prevention from city funds, and suggested we would rely on philanthropy for that work. When we're investing in so many other things, yes, worthy things, yes, all the points are things I wholeheartedly agree with, but I can't help but just reflect on that. So I hope the council members who are passionately supporting this will also support investing city dollars in gun violence prevention and the violence prevention work that we've been talking about.
Council Vice President Jenkins.
Ordinarily, I might be criticizing this this motion. However, one of my team members just, informed me that they are considering home euthanasia for their beloved pet, and it's really heartbreaking. And the comments from Councilmember Cunningham and subsequently Councilmember Goodman really make sense. We do need to be supporting our communities around the pets and the animals that they care for, and many times keeps people mentally sound. And so thank you, Council Members Cunningham and Goodman, for bringing this motion forward today.
Thank you. Seeing no one else in queue, I will ask the clerk to call the roll on this item. And I do want to mention, I have received some feedback from the authors of these next motions. They do think they will go quickly. And so I'm going to suggest that we adjourn no later than 5:20 today, but that we try to get through the subsequent two motions. So on motion 11 by Council Members Cunningham and Goodman, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Kano,
Aye.
Bender,
Aye.
Schrader,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Fletcher,
Aye.
Chair Palmisano.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Next, we have motion number 12 by Council President Bender. I do want to note this is different than in the packets, and it's updated on the screen in the live feed. And I'll ask Director Intermill to read it for us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, Amendment number 12 is a motion by Councilmember Bender directing staff in the Community Planning and Economic Development, Health, and Finance and Property Services Departments to bring forth a spending plan for the city's CDBG-CV3, that is the Community and Development Block Grant COVID third round of funding award, to the Policy and Government Oversight Committee in the first quarter of 2021. Staff shall prioritize $300,000 to fund 2 positions in the Health Department to support the city's homelessness response efforts.
Thank you. Council President Bender, did you want to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll just note, if this seems like it will take a long time, we should delay this item probably to the end of Monday or even to Wednesday. I just want to bring this for transparency purposes, really, as we were talking through a lot of the safety needs and investments, after this year's experience on many fronts, it's become very clear that, the city is facing an enormous crisis of homelessness for a variety of factors. We're seeing very large encampments. We've tried very hard to work with the state and the county, and collectively we're all putting in more resources than we ever have. But this piece about direct outreach to folks who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness and in our encampments has been missing, and it doesn't seem like it is going to be filled by other units of government. And so this is another area where we have staff across the enterprise who have full-time jobs doing other things, who have become staff for homelessness and encampments specifically. As we were talking through this, there is a similar approach to staffing CPED more appropriately to respond to encampments. That will be funded through CDBG funds that are an eligible expense. So like that approach, we can also use that funding source to better resource the health department to support the work that they are already doing around encampment, but also to just put more capacity within the city to do direct outreach. And this is specific to the health and safety needs of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness. It has funding for 2 staff, which would be temporary. This is one-time dollars. And also a lot of the different, the porta potties, hand washing stations. It has some funding for healthcare for the homeless to do some health analysis. So what this is just really doing is asking staff to include this in their recommendations early next year that will be coming forward for CDBG dollars. We're not doing that for all the other things that they're likely to recommend, but this is a little bit of a different use than we usually use the CDBG dollars for. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Council Member Kano.
Sorry, it is late on a Friday afternoon and my children are here, so I have to let them know when I'm going to speak. So I'm looking at this and of course, reflecting a lot on how this issue evolved in Minneapolis over the last 5 to 6 months. And I'll say that it sounds like a good idea. I really want to hear a little bit more from city staff on the strategy of how these 2 positions might or would live within all the other strategies that we already have in place. And part of the rationale there is that I think it's really important to ensure that we're not creating redundancies in our systems and creating more sort of one-off efforts, but that the efforts that we're funding are bridging a gap or connecting one type of strategy with another to have a more sustainable and far-reaching approach or system. And that's sort of what we're doing with the arts work, is that we're noticing there's some level of redundancies across the enterprise. And so having a place to kind of get those strategies under one roof is important. Additionally, I'll add that it would be great to hear from staff about how these two positions, if approved, and if they seem to have a strong rationale for them, would help leverage the multitude of groups that the city already funds to do this work. So much like the homeownership program and the tenants' rights programs that we have, we do outsource a lot of the community engagement efforts on this front so that staff aren't stuck providing direct services, as Councilmember Goodman was mentioning. So one thing we know is that, we fund Avivo, we fund American Indian Community Development Center, we fund Indigenous Peoples Task Force, Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center, we fund St. Stephen's, Southside Harm Reduction. There are a dozen groups that we fund to help around this issue. But I don't get a sense that those groups are working together and that we have a centralized coordinated strategy to be proactive on this front. So a lot of times it falls on our offices to report a problem, which then triggers the response. And I think I would much rather see a system where we are already weaving a proactive strategy that is requiring the 12 or so nonprofit organizations that we already fund. Inquilinos Unidos is another one that we can add to the list, to ensure that they're all working together on similar strategies, moving in the same direction and supporting one another to coordinate proactive outreach on homelessness, particularly because it cannot wait for example, 26th and Bloomington to explode with 30 people sleeping on the street and then just rely on the council member to call 311 or to call Katie Topinka and CPED to say, hey, what's going on? So I really think we need to make sure that if we do as a city have more resources for this topic, that we're being really strategic and pushing for more from all of the players that are involved in this conversation. We have to go above and beyond throwing money at the problem and really setting expectations of the work that we fund and what we hope will come out of that. So maybe these folks can help be conveners, coordinators, manage some kind of a centralized schedule of outreach and presence in the community, because I field so many questions from people who are like, well, what's going on in this corner, or why is it erupting over here? And then all we do is call St. Stephen's, and then all we do is call Avivo, all we do is call American Indian CDC, and it just doesn't feel it doesn't feel efficient, it doesn't feel effective, it doesn't feel smart, it doesn't feel proactive. So it would be great to see how this conversation could perhaps lead to a more comprehensive approach at how we do this work, in addition to weaving in the county efforts and the state efforts as well, if there are any that we can sort of plug into these things. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we move on, I'm going to ask Director Brennan to maybe speak to some of those comments. She asked to do so. Director Brennan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and council members. Wanted to just respond to a couple of the points that Councilmember Cano made. First, the city received a significant amount of federal funding through the Emergency Solutions Grant and Community Development Block Grant funds as part of the federal CARES money. And one of the things that we have prioritized is that the council has approved is awarding additional contracts to perform street outreach to the organizations that Councilmember Cano identified. And because we've significantly increased our investment in this service, and again, we've done that intentionally in funding specifically culturally appropriate communities, the American Indian Community Development Agency, as well as the Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center, as well as others. And so because we've extended this investment in outreach, we are also using ESG funding to create a new city position. And that position right now, actually, we are in the interviewing process of hiring an unsheltered homeless coordinator position that will be located in CPED. And the primary role of this position is going to coordinate the outreach activities of all of the different contracts that the city has entered into. And we took this on in very strong partnership with the county and the Office to End Homelessness team over there, so that we will be working very, very closely together, as we have been throughout this entire last couple of years, increasingly so. The county has a outreach worker on staff, so that person is also involved in this broader team. And so I think having that staff person in-house to help specifically coordinate all of these activities is going to make a significant difference in the coordination around street outreach. The other point I would make, and I would let Commissioner Musicant speak to this particular budget amendment, but what I do think is really important is that there's a tremendous amount of coordination that is happening throughout the enterprise. So between CPED, the health department, the Homeless and Vulnerable Populations Initiative in MPD, Public Works, it is really a lot of different folks around the enterprise are involved in our collective response to addressing unsheltered homelessness, and also across other agencies. So that would include working very closely with the county and the state. So I just wanted to make that point, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions about our collective homeless response.
Thank you. There's a couple more people in queue. Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will be very brief. I do support this motion. I do think, however, it brings up some philosophical issues that I think Councilmember Cano brought forward, and certainly Director Brennan addressed. But it really is about how are we working with other jurisdictions and governmental entities. Historically, this has been a role for Hennepin County, and certainly these issues are occurring in the city of Minneapolis, and so we must take responsibility and deal with these issues as well. But it has to be, I think, as Councilmember Cano eloquently stated, that we need to be coordinating our efforts more fully. And I understand Director Brennan stated that is in fact happening, and that these two staff positions will support those efforts. But those are some of the broader, more philosophical differences and challenges that we need to grapple with. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll let Council President Bender seem like she wanted to respond to that.
I can just go at the end, in the interest of time.
Sounds good. Council Member Goodman.
In the interest of time, I just want to note that I'm very supportive of this effort by Councilmember Bender, and hopefully we can get to a vote fairly quickly. Thank you.
Council President Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to note, we've all spent hours and hours in meetings about encampments specifically, and I'm happy to follow up. I hear and agree with every single comment that's been made. This funding is very specifically focused on the health-related issues. So where do we put porta potties? Where do we put hand washing stations? What are potential infectious disease risks for our homeless population, including COVID, if it is still a factor next summer, which is likely, along with hepatitis A and HIV. And these are just not functions that the contracting organizations are really able to make. So there hasn't been staff. There have been staff, but it's the same staff that are working on kind of a lot of other things. There haven't been dedicated staff who are able to make these kinds of recommendations. I also think we may need to adopt a city policy related to encampments. And this staff could help provide the health-related policy advice, along with the advice we would be getting from CPED and our first responders to inform decisions. So I just want to make sure that we're prepared for next summer so that we're not caught flat-footed, and just really make sure that we have the actual capacity in staff to do the functions that the city really needs to do, which is make those frontline decisions about how we're keeping people healthy and safe. So thanks. And again, I'm very happy to follow up, work closely with Director Brennan and the health department, as well as the folks at IGR who manage the CDBG program. And this would come through for a final vote in early next year, along with the other recommendations that will be coming from staff for CDBG. It's just that those will be more housing related. And so I just wanted to make sure that this was, we could have just done this then, but I wanted to be transparent, and staff thought it would be helpful to bring this now. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing nobody else in queue, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on item number 12.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Chair Palmisano.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Item number 13 is a motion by Councilmember Fletcher. Director Intramural, will you read the motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, amendment number 13 is a motion by Councilmember Fletcher, directing staff in the Finance and Property Services Department and the City Attorney's Office to research best practices and develop options for the City Council regarding making changes to the city's legal level of budgetary control. Staff shall present this information to the Council Committee with jurisdiction over city finances no later than March 31st, 2021.
Thank you. Councilmember Fletcher, did you want to speak to your amendment?
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm hoping this is non-controversial since we're asking them to come back with a recommendation that we can debate and vote on in April. But I just want to name, this goes back to the mid-year budget conversations that we had around identifying sources and recognizing that we could fund a program and that department heads under our current financial policies can shift that money and not actually do the program we funded and do something else. And that it is certainly a matter of etiquette and tradition and probably sort of good politics and relationship management to basically do the things that you're funded to do, but that we have a very light level of control and department heads have wide latitude to move items within departments. And occasionally that prompts some of my constituents to ask if we're actually using the power of the budget in the way that we should as council members, and if we're actually asserting the level of oversight that we should be asserting. So I started a conversation with Director Intramural, sorry, with the end of a long day. And we agreed that this conversation would go better outside of the budget process, that it would be better to give a direction to come back later in the year and start thinking towards next year's budget about whether we might want to make those changes. That would give us time to talk to department heads about what kind of impact this would have. We don't want to be so restrictive that they have to come to the council for every stupid little thing, but we also do want to make sure that we have a level of oversight that this budgeting process is meaningful. So that's the intent, and I'm hopeful that we can pass this staff direction and start this conversation that will be continued mid-year.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from council members? I'll just quickly put myself in queue to say thank you for this staff direction. I appreciate it. Had an opportunity to speak with the budget director about it and how we could help to talk about more of this throughout the year instead of how it normally operates, which is just, a few weeks here at the end of each year in sort of a rushed fashion. Are there any, seeing no more comments or questions from other colleagues at this time, I will ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Osman. Councilmember Osman. Goodman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Kano. Bender.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Osman. Kano.
I'm having a mic problem. Can you hear me?
Yes, gotcha, Councilmember Osman.
Aye.
Chair Palmisano.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes.
Thank you. That motion carries. With that, colleagues, we've completed the amendments that we said we would complete today. At this point, and without objection, I will adjourn this meeting to Monday, December 7th at 1:30 p.m. to complete our work on the 2021 budget. Thank you for your time and your patience this afternoon.